Okay, I think we're live. Nice. All right, welcome to everybody, whether you are on LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok, wherever you are. I want to tell you that it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. Facebook, don't want to forget all my friends on Facebook. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this important conversation about leadership. And we're going to focus on a topic, an area, excuse me, that is near and dear to my heart because oftentimes we talk about what leadership is and all the elements that are, I guess you'd say, necessary for leadership success. And we often forget about elements that are critical, but really on the other side of it, if you will, and that is when leadership goes off. When leadership is dangerous, when leaders create more problems than they solve, often unintentionally, but often nonetheless, it's still an issue. And we have to look at it, we have to resolve it, or at least discuss it, because ultimately, if we don't, then there's a really good chance that either yourself as a leader or somebody who you work with and supports you officially, but maybe doesn't in the way that they need to, create situations where, frankly, you're not able to do your very best work. And so we want to talk about what happens when leadership goes toxic, when leaders spell danger. Okay. So it's not just a matter of productivity. There's one thing where people aren't necessarily clear on what they need to accomplish. And so they're maybe a little bit unfocused, or they don't really know where to spend their time or energy. But here we're talking about where people actually find it difficult to show up in the office. There's issues with the culture, there's issues with the team, there's issues with the mission. And what happens when you have leadership that is promoting this, that is creating an environment where this kind of thing is happening? And as a result of that, you wind up getting in many ways more damage than good. So the question is, how do we get into this? How does this happen? And more importantly, how do we change it? How do we move away from it so that leadership could be what it's supposed to be, which is nurturing and supporting and encouraging and guiding and empowering, right? But when leadership doesn't do that, when the leader is more focused on his or her agenda, or where the outcomes trump the people, that's often what goes on over here. And I want to thank everybody who's joining me, who's been in this conversation so far. Thank you all for being here, and thank you so much for any feedback. I'd love to hear from you because this is an important discussion, and I want to share with you four signs of leadership that would indicate that we're heading into dangerous territory. This will be an indication that something is not quite right, and we need to fix it. So if you're walking into, it's interesting because I'll observe in classrooms as a teacher coach, I'll walk into offices as a business coach and help understand the environment, right? Help understand the dynamic and look at things that many people have, I guess you'd say, taken for granted because they're so used to it. It's their day-to-day experience. And I'll walk in there and I'll say, I observed this, I noticed that, tell me more about this. And so often as an outside observer, you can see more and you could identify more than, let's say, if you're in it on a day-to-day basis. But regardless, whether you're in the environment or not, I think that there are four things in particular, four areas specifically, that if we were to address them, before we address them, first we got to know what they are, right? So one sign that leadership might be heading into dangerous territory is where the people go quiet. What do I mean that they're going quiet? It's not that they're thinking and contemplating and they're reflecting, and that's all great stuff, right? We need more quiet in our lives, frankly. And for us to be more productive, we actually need to carve out time where we're being more productive and more focused by being quiet, being able to reflect, not always being pinged and interrupted, etc. But here we're talking about a quiet that comes from not feeling safe. right? Has anyone here experienced that? Do you ever experience, I don't feel safe, so I'm going to keep my mouth shut. I'm afraid that if I say anything, it's going to cause more harm than good. People aren't going to relate well to my commentary or to my feedback. And as a result, they just get quiet. So there's no pushback. There's no new ideas coming through. People aren't really asking questions. It's like they're head down. They're not engaged. They're yes people, yes sir, yes ma'am, whatever you want, I'll do, that kind of thing. But they're not really engaged in the process. They're not asking critical questions. They're not pushing back in a healthy way. They're not offering alternatives because they feel genuinely that if I speak up, there will be problems. I've learned not to speak up. I've learned that if I say things, I'll get shot down, I'll get dismissed, maybe I'll be looked badly upon. I actually had this with a client just yesterday. We were talking. He's a relatively senior ranking member of a very substantial nonprofit that does a lot of work in mental health and other areas. And he told me that he feels, maybe not even intentionally, but that the upper leadership team has more than once shut people down, directly or indirectly, because they spoke up and what they had to say didn't align with what the leadership team was interested in hearing. And the result of that wasn't very good. So it's very important to understand that this is an element of a toxic form of leadership, right? That's a red flag right there. If your team has gone silent, that is absolutely a red flag and something that we have to avoid. Indicator number 2 is that the values that everybody has ascribed to, all the things that we stand for and that we represent and the things that make our company unique, those values don't mean anything, right? It'll say things on the wall like integrity, teamwork, openness, collaboration, right? All these buzzwords, all these great terms, and they are great terms in theory. They are great terms. But when the values themselves are not represented, forget the walls. They're not represented in the actions. They're not represented in the work environment. They're not represented in the day-to-day experiences that people have. Then what we know deep down is that it's not about the values. It's about the politics, what's being rewarded, right? If you want to know what people really value, look at what's being rewarded. So if it's politics, favoritism, hitting the numbers at any cost, when people stop believing that the values matter and they believe instead that it's the other things and that doing your very best work really doesn't matter so long as you're not cozying up to the right people or making people like you as your primary focus. Obviously, we all want to be liked. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be liked, but prioritizing being liked over actually getting the work done, right? Actually being successful. That's where you see the cracks start to form in the foundation, because ultimately what the leadership is doing is that it's compromising mission for convenience. And we all know what that looks and feels like. And that's a yucky, yucky feeling. If you're on the team, you're doing your very best work, but you feel like, someone else is getting the reward for things that are not aligned with the core. They're getting the recognition for things other than the work itself. That's really a bad sign. So those are the first 2. Now let's talk about number 3. The third indicator of trouble is that results matter more than people. And I've seen this all the time. Teams burn out. Things get brushed off because we hit the goal, right? If we hit the goal, that's all that matters, right? We hit our numbers, and our shareholders, if we have in there, shareholders are happy, our investors are happy. But internally, people are getting mistreated. People are not necessarily being valued, but the leader gets a pass, right? Why does the leader get a pass? Because we're being effective, because I'm being effective, right? We're hitting our numbers, we're being successful. So you think that that's enough, but we know that deep down, people want to feel valued. In fact, it's interesting. Often we think that when it comes to workplace engagement, the number one indicator is how much money people are being paid. And the more I'm being paid, the more engaged I'm going to be. Interestingly enough, at a certain point, income or salary is no longer the biggest motivator. What people really want is to be part of a community. They want to feel valued. They want to have engaging work where they feel recognized for that work and they feel that their work is making a difference, that they feel like they have a purpose. And when those things get stepped on in the interest of making the numbers and reaching the deadlines and whatever that is, you're going to have trouble. Because good leaders, I would even say great leaders, recognize that their people are their most important asset. And they prioritize their people over every other consideration. So that's really important. And many leaders lose sight of that, especially with deadlines, especially if they're feeling pressure. I don't want to make this all about people doing things intentionally. It's often not intentional at all. But bottom line is it happens. And when it happens, we have problems. And people don't want to work in such environments. And then the fourth indicator is that people are prioritizing loyalty to purpose over loyalty to people. And this one may be the most dangerous of all of them. When it's all about staying on somebody's good side, when it's all about sort of putting on a good face to the outside and making people happy, then you lose the mission, right? Because then people are thinking very differently about their roles and they're not willing to step up and do what needs to be done. If I disagree, then it's like about betrayal. It's like I'm betraying the person because I don't agree with your take on things. I don't agree with your strategy. And oftentimes that disagreement, frankly, is the very best thing you could do because that's what creates a healthy work environment. That's what creates opportunity for people to really think differently. If I'm in my own echo chamber and I only think a certain way, then as a leader, I'm limiting myself. Great leaders open it up for discussion. Great leaders invite people to share their opinions. Leaders are willing to be told that they're wrong or that there's a better way of doing it. But then if they don't act like this, then they feel betrayed when people disagree with them. They start to promote based on loyalty and based on relationships rather than based on results. They start to make everything political and they start to keep score. And that can create a very, very unhealthy workplace environment. And so it's really critical for us to understand that as leaders, we have tremendous power and we have to leverage that power effectively and consistently in a healthy way to get the most out of our people. Now, I absolutely would love everyone who is here. Thank you so much for being here, by the way. I absolutely would love everybody who is here to engage. If you like what I'm sharing, please click the like button. Or that heart icon. If you have insights, if you've experienced this, talk about it. Share what's going on in your environment, right? If leadership where you are, maybe it's even yourself and you're willing to admit it, because honestly, I learned so much from my mistakes as a leader. I wrote a book, Becoming the New Boss. You can check it out. It's on Amazon. That book was largely the result of the errors that I made. Now, it's not a autobiography. It's not just here's everything I did wrong, but I do sprinkle in quite a few of the mistakes that I made because I want others to learn from it. And frankly, it was sort of healthy for me to be able to admit it and to learn from it and to hopefully do better the next time, right? Leadership, all of us, we're people. We're not perfect. But what we want to do is we want to be able to learn from our experiences, of course, course correct, of course, make improvements wherever we can. So please do engage. And my question for you is, have you seen this before? Is what I'm describing something that you could relate to? Have you done this? Have you been part of this? Have you witnessed this? Do you have friends or spouses, family members, etc., that experience this every single day when they go to work? Right? What parts of it sound familiar to you? And which part, frankly, do you find to be most dangerous? What are you most concerned with? I'm looking to see if there are any comments, any involvement here. I'd absolutely love to be able to respond to your comments or questions. So please do show the any indication at all how this resonates with you, and of course anything that I can respond to. So drop your thoughts in the comments. How does this show up in your world? And if you're a leader, like I said, which of these are you watching for to say, I need to improve upon that? So I'm just going to give everybody a moment to think about this. If there's anything that you want to add here, now is your opportunity. I know I've been doing a lot of sharing, and I'd like to do some listening and some reading and some learning. All right, a real shout out to everybody here. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for staying with me. In the meantime, since I don't see any of your comments, I'm going to wrap this up, but I will still look for your comments until the end. Right? So we said that dangerous leadership, it doesn't look evil necessarily. And the person isn't evil most of the time. They're good, well-intentioned people. However, we're all human beings. And what's happening is we're missing the warning signs. We're not realizing the implications of our behaviors on ourselves and on others. If you do see the signs, however, and you care enough to do something, truth is that's real leadership. And I do want to impress upon everyone, oftentimes we think that leadership comes with a title. Leadership does not come with a title necessarily. Some of the best leaders that I know had no formal title. And some of the weakest leaders that I know had very high-level titles. So title does not in and of itself make you a leader. What makes you a leader, as John Maxwell says, is that you are a person of influence. And how do I know that I'm being influential? Because I'm changing behaviors. I'm changing mindsets. I'm allowing people to look and think about things in a different way. So if you really do want to be a leader, if you really do want to impress, obviously, you have to be careful with how you do it. We don't want to be bulls in china shops, but we do want to respectfully and firmly present what's going on and say, hey, I'm noticing this. How can we address this? I'm noticing this, and this is what happens. I always like, by the way, whenever I give feedback, to not only say what I do or do not like, but I also like to share the implications. I'm noticing this. And as a result of this, this is happening. As a result of X, we have Y. So I'm noticing that at our meetings, certain people seem to be given priority in the discussions. And when that happens, others, including many of the junior members around the table, aren't feeling included, aren't feeling like their voice matters. So you're connecting the behavior directly to a result. And if it's a negative result, and you bring that awareness to the leader, hopefully you can help that person to make changes that improve the quality of the meetings moving forward. So to wrap up here, if you see the signs and you care enough, do something, right? We don't need perfect leaders. We just need leaders that are aware. And you need, in many cases, to bring that awareness. I had so many instances where members of my team brought things to my attention that I was too blind to see on my own. And I think it's critical for us to empower people and to give them permission to say, hey, I'm not perfect. I know I'm not perfect. I'm going to make a lot of mistakes. And I really, really would appreciate it if you course corrected for me or with me, if you gave me some feedback about how I can be better. When you're committed to leadership that builds trust, that lives the values, that honors the people, everyone around the table, everyone in the office, and stays loyal to the mission, not the titles, but what we're really after deep down, not the politics, not the positioning, not the posturing, the main mission of the business or organization that you're involved with, that's going to transform leadership from toxic, from unhealthy, from counterproductive to super healthy and super productive, very focused on what really matters most. And that's the kind of business, with all of the turbulence we've got going on politically, geopolitically, AI, you name it, so many disruptors going on. What you need more than ever are your people. and you need your people to be in a healthy, committed, and dedicated place. And that can only happen if you as a leader, or we as those being led, create the environment necessary for that to happen. So again, I want to thank you for being here. Any final questions or comments, I will welcome them. In the meantime, I want to wish you all a fantastic and productive day. And please message me if you'd like to talk more or learn more about leadership and other ways by which coaching and healthy workplace environments can transform your daily tasks. So thank you again for being here. Have a fantastic day. Let's talk soon.